Please be advised that this recorded webinar has been edited from its original format, which may have included a product demo. To set up a live demo or to request more information, please complete the form to the right. Or if you are currently not on CSC Global, there is a link to the website in the description of this video. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Simplify Your Insurance Industry Licensing Process. My name is Annie Triboletti, and I will be your moderator. Joining us today are Brian Bartnicki and Kayla Heathman. Brian is the Senior Business License Sales Engineer at the forefront, assisting customers with their industry-specific requirements, which range from research, portfolio management, and renewal services. Brian has worked with CSC for more than a decade, offering his expertise in the field of license compliance. Kayla is a sales engineer that supports the Corporate Legal Services Group at CSC and is based in Wilmington, Delaware. Since joining CSC in 2015, Kayla has focused on B2B relationship management and consulting to find solutions that best fit the needs of new clients. And with that, let's welcome Brian and Kayla.
Great, thanks, Annie. So first, good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, we just wanted to review a quick agenda of today's webinar. So first, we'll start by providing some background on CSC. We will cover some of the common compliance standards that often come up when we're talking about licensing. Then we'll really focus on the insurance-specific requirements like producer licenses, TPAs, and more. And then with licenses always comes challenges. So we're going to discuss some of the pain points that CSC hears about. We'll continue with challenges and understand how some of those challenges can turn into consequences of non-compliance. We'll then turn our focus on how CSC can streamline your licensing process today in just 5 easy steps. And we're also going to provide a visual on our portfolio management system. And then lastly, we're going to open up the session for you and some Q&A. So first, a brief background or refresher on CSC. We've been in the business of compliance for over 120 years, and we're headquartered in Wilmington, Delaware. Today, we serve more than 180,000 corporate customers, which does include 90% of the Fortune 500. We're supporting more than 10,000 law firms and provide solutions to over 3,000 financial market customers. We even protect 65% of the 100 best global brands around. We're able to do this because of the 2,500 and counting employees that support our clients in all of the U.S. jurisdictions and many, many countries across the globe. So first, to switch gears to why we're really all here today, let's begin by reviewing some of the common compliance standards that are a part of every licensing conversation here at CSC. The first standard that we really speak to is the Secretary of State registration. It's really important to note that while CSC is able to assist with these registrations and the Secretary of State requirements, they are definitely considered an entirely separate filing from any insurance filing or license. Sometimes these filings will come up as you begin to grow and offer new products in new states. And they're really truly meant to just register your entity to do business within that particular state. And just because you have that Secretary of State registration doesn't necessarily mean that you are appropriately licensed or even ready to begin selling policies in those states. It's definitely something that is a whole nother animal and is on the opposite end of the spectrum from the insurance portion. So going hand in hand with those registrations or qualifications with the Secretary of State is the annual report or annual requirement to that state. These filings are considered to be the ongoing maintenance with those authorities. And again, while CSC can assist with those filings, they are truly an additional filing that needs to be completed year over year or even every other year to remain in good standing with that state and be able to be considered allowed to do business. So while those requirements can absolutely impact any insurance requirement that you're fulfilling, the most important licenses will actually be those obviously specific to the insurance world and your specific insurance activities. So those requirements include licenses for an agency or an individual, and all types of lines of authority like P&C or life and health, even your resident or non-resident state licenses, but also maybe more nuanced businesses like TPAs, surplus, or adjusters. Really, to dive a little bit further into these licenses here today, I'm going to pass this over to Brian, and he can chat further.
Thanks, Kayla. So I think it's important, as we talked about some of the differences between Secretary of State and insurance, just to kind of talk about this at a high level, the types of insurance licenses that are out there. Really some of the questions that come with that. Just to kind of talk about each of these one by one. For those of you that are small, you might have your agency listed in one particular state, and you as an individual as well. Maybe you're just working out of your house and you're selling insurance as well, and that's your home state where you physically live or where you're headquartered as a business. But beyond that, you're going to have, probably a lot of you have non-resident states in other places, of course, outside of your home state that you're particularly selling. Beyond the non-residents, some of you, may have surplus line licenses. We're going to see those where maybe the risk is too high and it's not available in that state, and maybe you have to seek that sort of the excess in others, or maybe it's just a different type of coverage. Again, that the risk isn't really appropriate, or someone wants to get a license in another state due to that reason. Others may have adjuster licenses, whether it's a public adjuster or just a regular adjuster. You may have, to look for claims, sort of evaluate or investigate the claims that are filed for that specific situation. And then we're going to have the third-party administrators. For those of you that have those licenses, these are very complex. We deal with financial statements, other types of numbers that have to be entered when filing and processing claims on behalf of businesses. So some of you may be involved in those. And then we have the appointments, whether it be for the agency or for those sole proprietors out there. Maybe in turn you're appointed to sell insurance for many carriers. You just know that those are some of the other items that we commonly see, of course, the types of licenses that are managed.
So now that we have gone through the different types of licenses that many people are dealing with, or that CSC sees a lot, those licenses are also going to have many different renewals or challenges related to management and even just the requirements, as we just mentioned. So we're going to talk about some of the common challenges that we hear on a daily basis, and maybe even some that you're experiencing today. So really the first major challenge we hear about is just manually tracking due dates. Depending on what types of licenses you're managing, there may be expiration dates across the bunch that very much so differ. So not only do they differ from month to month, it's also common for them to differ from year to year, depending on if you have agency licenses or individual licenses. And whether you're tracking these expirations on a spreadsheet or through Outlook notifications, having to constantly check back in on that non-automated system can really be cumbersome. And another thing we'll touch base on is if you have other responsibilities, it might just become something that falls through the cracks if you're having a busy day. One other challenge we hear about manually tracking is just accuracy. How do we know if these licenses are being consistently updated? Maybe you just took over the role and your predecessor didn't keep great records. Or are there licenses missing? Or maybe did we just forget to save the spreadsheet? All of these common challenges are coming up on a daily basis. Aside from the manually tracking, there becomes an issue with just transparency on your license statuses and even copies. So really, are you able to understand immediately if your license is active, or do you even get access to your license copies after you file these renewals? Some of those challenges become, how can you get all of those expiration dates, your active statuses, really that core license data and copies all in just one place for your reference, so it's easy for you to navigate. If you're not really even about tracking or just don't have records today, which is very common, we might be discussing more of a reactionary approach to those licenses. And really, if this is the case, waiting for those reminders might seem like a great idea, especially when you don't have very many to renew. But the reality is that more and more authorities are limiting the amount of reminders that are being sent. And then also, if you miss a reminder or if it goes to your spam mailbox, if you're working from home and getting mail somewhere else, then are you really getting the appropriate notices at the appropriate times? Or are you at risk of missing a filing? And really, in a bit, Brian will kind of speak to some of those consequences of missed filings. And really, it just could be from that reactionary approach. Really, another challenge would be internal administrative costs. Maybe it's just time allocation or the cost of checks or credit card transactions. And it really could even be penalties or rejections. But whatever it may be, the real challenge is how are you offsetting those costs that are impacting the operations when you're filing internally? One thing that we did touch base on a little bit on is just the alternative priorities. Many of us wear many hats within our organizations, and sometimes there are just things that do take priority over other responsibilities. And that could be a challenge also of manually tracking. Multiple priorities could mean that you're weighing the pros and cons or the consequences of one versus the other on a daily basis. Sometimes we really experience fires that need to be put out immediately, and other times our just attention is everywhere else other than on maybe where it should be. So having too much on your plate can certainly have an impact on these licenses. And lastly is just the reality that figuring out what you need to file could be the most difficult thing. Earlier, we touched base on those Secretary of State requirements, how they differ from insurance licenses and all of those registrations, but maybe it's just not always clear how they apply to you or where they fit into your agency models. There's also challenges of just obtaining those applications and what do you need to complete in order to submit them? Is there testing, fingerprints? Do you have to list a designated responsible party? Do you need to use the mail, or is there now an online filing option? So confusion as to what's just actually required to file is certainly one of the most common challenges that we face every day and that we hear customers are facing as well. So with some of those challenges, I'm also going to pass this to Brian to discuss maybe how some of those challenges can lead to unwanted consequences.
Thanks, Kayla. So as Kayla stated, one of the other items I want to bring up, questions I get all the time, Kayla mentioned the Secretary of State. Some people will say, well, do I need an adjuster license, or can I just use a non-resident license, or do I need a TPA? Can I have a TPA instead of an adjuster? So it's really the ambiguity of the world because it's highly regulated, and it's really important that you can really know what you need. And to that, we get consequences if things don't go right. So if for some reason let's say you have a license in a particular state and you're delinquent, and delinquencies can occur with a variety of situations. Maybe you simply miss a license. Or because we're dealing with, again, regulatory authorities, there are certain items that you need to report. So for the first item here, we talk about, fines or failure to report timely administrative actions. Let's say you fail to report a situation where maybe you now have a child support obligation. You live in Pennsylvania. Now you have a child support obligation. You fail to notify the state of Pennsylvania, and the state of Pennsylvania now provides an administrative action to you because you failed to report it. That results in fines. It could result in a lot of issues, especially, which we'll talk about later on here, all the other states in which that you conduct business and where you also are licensed. Now, so you could sell without a license. The next one is a loss of license or potential cease and desist. If you have a license and, of course, if maybe it expires, you just forgot to renew it, maybe you didn't fulfill your continuing education on time, now you're actually selling without a license. Your policies are out there. The citizens, are at risk of a loss here potentially. It's critical because you were not licensed when you issued them the policy. If maybe it happens one time, it's rectified a second time, believe it or not, or multiple times, or initially, it could even result in a cease and desist from that particular state, preventing you from selling insurance in that jurisdiction, which also amplifies the issue if you physically live in that state and you need that home state, of course, on the resident side initially. If you don't comply, and I kind of alluded to this, with your resident requirement, it will trickle down into all the other governing bodies, all the other non-resident states in which you do business. And it's really important that when you have any I would go back to the child support item, that you're notifying all these jurisdictions when that happens. Because if you don't, again, then we have to rectify those administrative actions. And really the other one I will mention with that is, let's say you physically move from one state to the other. It's important that you physically make those changes within 30 days. And that's more of a complying with resident or non-resident states. If you move or a name change occurs, the timely nature in which that has to be done and the importance in which that has to be done is absolutely critical. And kind of tagging along with that really comes down to whether you as an individual, can an agency license status actually be affected by that? And for those of you, or you have individuals that are designated responsible parties or producers in those particular states, it's absolutely imperative that they keep their license compliant. If they're inactive for certain reasons, or maybe they get a DUI in the state, right? They have to report that, or administrative actions can occur, things of that nature. It really can result in negligence if the license lapses, and if you don't renew that or rectify that in 30 days, now the agency license, because that individual was tied as a designated responsible party, is in fact in jeopardy. So those are just some of the consequences that can occur. It's just absolutely vital, especially with the regulatory world that is insurance. And we really felt that it was appropriate, to share those as items that can occur.
So we've reviewed some regulations, challenges, consequences, and as Brian mentioned, we're going to shift those gears to see how CSC fits into this puzzle with you and how we can help alleviate those pain points along the way. So really, how can CSC help? CSC can become a direct extension of your team through our licensed outsourcing solution and that partnership. And this really means that CSC can take over the management of your insurance licenses and provide the solutions to many of the challenges or problems that you could be experiencing. CSC's outsourcing solution provides the ability to minimize risk by tracking all of those license expirations and filing the licenses within the applicable timeframes on your behalf, so that way you are remaining in compliance and you're not going to be faced by any of those consequences that Brian mentioned. None of your licenses are going to be falling out of good standing there and causing that trickle-down effect. It can decrease the administrative burdens within your organization because we're going to also pay for those licenses on your behalf when we're completing those filings. And that will take away time with check cutting or just different types of time management things, also because CSC is going to complete the entire preparation and filing of that license and being that person who's taking care of that administrative work. We're going to help eliminate those complexities that we had talked about by really just effectively communicating with you and together to ensure that we're all on the same page. We know what we need to file those licenses on your behalf, and we're going to communicate that to you so that way you always know if there is any actions that you have to take, reporting those child support numbers or providing fingerprints, things like that. We're going to provide full transparency into what CSC is doing within the license portfolio and when we're doing it. As Brian mentioned, in times like today, some of the Excel spreadsheets or things are not providing that transparency into the information and the licenses themselves. So we're going to provide technology to track the licenses, store your license copies, all of the expiration dates, and really all of the filings that CSC is going to be submitting on your behalf. With the outsourcing with CSC, we can look at reducing some costs in dollars and cents, but also, again, in that time allocation for the organization. We have a relationship with NIR to a very incredibly smooth transition to our outsourcing solution. It does give us the ability to pull together your license data without anything other than NPN numbers and a signature. So the implementation really is very simple for you, and there's not a whole ton that you need to provide to us here to ensure that we can get up and running. And then lastly, our program provides that centralization of information, along with that transparency, the information, the data from the due date to, again, the license copies, or even other regulations like the Secretary of State filings. Our technology and platform allows for one central point of that technology to manage agency licenses and even individual licenses all together in one place. How does the outsourcing partnership work with CSC? We've really outlined about 5 very, very easy steps for you, but more so what CSC is going to do during those steps to ensure that this partnership could be a good fit. So step 1, CSC is going to gather all of your license data and documentation, and we're going to leverage our partnership with NIPR, as mentioned, and really only ask you to complete one authorization form, giving us the NPN numbers assigned to the agency and the individuals that you want to have in the system here. So from there, CSC is going to download all of that license data directly from the National Insurance Producer Registry, and we're going to build your information into our CSC License Portfolio Management tool. There's no legwork for you to get this information into the technology, and it truly is going to be something that CSC does on your behalf. Once we get that license data into the portfolio, we're going to transition to our step 2 by providing proactive notifications for you of any of your upcoming license expirations. These reports are sent via email to all of your license contacts on file with CSC, and they'll report to you on anything expiring really over the next 60 days, so we can be working as far in advance as possible on these renewals. And then step 3 is really acting upon those expiration reports on your behalf. If a license is on that report that you've received, CSC is really already working on it. We're going to pull together all of the applications that are necessary. We're going to begin preparing them with information that we already have on file about your agency or your individuals. And we'll let you know if there's anything else additional from you that we need. These things are the complexities. Do we need fingerprint cards? Do we need information about child support? Do we need financials about the company? Do we need to supply even articles of incorporation or something like that for some of these licenses? And are those pertinent in order to complete the filing? If they are, we're going to let you know everything that we need along the way. And then we're going to submit the licenses for you on your behalf. And as mentioned, we do submit the payments too, to ensure that you don't have to provide CSC any checks or anything related to that jurisdiction. We're going to make sure we take care of that. So after we file, CSC's step 4 is really to do any and all legwork to actually obtain that new license copy for you and make sure that this technology that we're talking about in the portfolio management system is always up to date with all of the appropriate expirations and license copies that are important to you, anything that's current and things that you need to know about. After we renew a license, we're actually going to take that a little bit of a step further, and we're going to archive and store any of the old or now expired or renewed licenses in your portfolio. So that way you have that historical document and historical record if you need to reference it in the years to come. And then lastly, when we bill for the services, we're only going to bill for them as they're rendered, and the invoices will be itemized line by line with CSC's service fee and whatever that jurisdictional fee was that CSC dispersed on your behalf. It's truly just going to be a reimbursement here. We also offer the ability for some flexible options when it comes to invoices, whether you'd like summarized monthly or you need accounting codes in your invoices. We're definitely going to work with you on that to ensure that all of your invoices are very clear and easy to decipher. So, and with that, talking about how CSC's solution works, I'm going to pass this back to Brian to review CSC's portfolio management system really in more detail and give you a sneak peek of the technology.
Thanks, Kayla. So I think what's really valuable with our platform, and for those of you that are CSC customers, or even those who are not, it's important to know that all the services that we provide are centralized in a world-class secure environment. We are SOC 2 compliant. And as long as you have internet connection, you have access to the portfolio or all the services that you would have with us. It's web-based. Again, you can access them 24/7. The goal here is really to centralize everything. And ultimately, if we're doing the work for you, you're going to prevent fines and penalties because we can make sure, again, that we're monitoring everything well in advance. It's very easy to implement, as Kayla mentioned, as long as we have that National Insurance Producer Registry consent. You can also be a small company, a large company. It's adaptable to all sizes. We do work with customers in all these areas, whether you're some of the largest agencies in America or just a sole proprietor. We help for all types of customers. And you have unlimited users as well. So for those of you that have situations where you want maybe regional managers to have access, or you want just certain officers to have access, or maybe you want to really expand it to a large number of users, we can absolutely make that happen. And there's even different levels of access. So if you want somebody to have administrative rights to see everything, we can make that happen. There's even a read-only function. And actually, if you really want to go further, we do have the ability to limit what users see. So, for example, if you want an individual to only see their own insurance licenses, their own adjuster licenses, for example, we can absolutely make that happen.